You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello.
I have too many pens.
Well, you know, Freud has an explanation for that.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
That's what they say.
But sometimes not. How are you today?
I'm good.
So, anything new and exciting going on in your life?
Not a thing.
Yeah.
Life is just bland.
Is that, bland or just stable?
Good.
Yeah. So not bland.
Life is good.
Yeah, life is good. And you're wearing a pink shirt today for anybody who is watching you on the YouTubes.
I've always liked the color pink.
Do you?
Yeah.
You don't feel conscientious in a pink shirt?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I always feel conscientious. Conspicuous, is that?
Oh, well, conspicuous, yes. What would you call it if you were worried about what other people thought? Not conscientious.
Insecure.
Well, yeah, okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
All right.
So, good segue, though.
Yes.
Because we're going to talk about attachment.
I would say that's because I'm a
You're
professional.
a professional.
Yeah, exactly.
You know that the foundation of what I believe in psychotherapy is emotional regulation. I believe that emotional regulation is the result of how you internalize the external object. So the quality of the relationship with the primary caregiver when the child is young. And we talk a lot about how childhood trauma and this emotional regulation developmental process can cause issues when the child is developing. One of the things that we've never talked about, and I found an article about it, and then I thought, oh yeah, we definitely should talk about this, is how does this affect the developmental process during adolescence? And I know that you were talking about this morning that when you were young, you felt like that the movers and shakers of the peer group that you were associated with didn't really give you a lot of positive feedback.
No. If that's what you heard, I didn't say it clearly.
Okay.
I grew up in a large suburban high school.
Yeah.
When I got to high school in Adolescence. That was very caste organized. I grew up in a southern town where your social standing could be measured by how far away from the railroad tracks you lived. The closer that you lived to the railroad tracks, the poorer and less socially acceptable your family was. But when they put us in high school, they lumped us all together. So people had to have identifiers. We had groups that we belonged to. We had Letterman jackets for band and for athletics and debate team and what have you, to find little subcategories and cliques and so on. I was acutely aware of how all that played out when I was in high school because I read all the time. And I had a curiosity about how does this work. And what I was telling you is that by definition, I was relegated to the lower socioeconomic community because of where I lived, what my father did for a living, how much money we had, those kind of things. But intellectually, I was put in accelerated classes, so I was mixed in with kids from the upper social spectrum who tended to get put in those accelerated classes. And I was commenting that it used to frustrate the heck out of me because sometimes I would tell a joke that I thought was funny, and they would all sneer about how low class I was and how horrible it was that I told that joke, and it wasn't couth, and nobody would laugh, and everybody would act like they smelled something bad. And then later, over the course of the next day or two, I would hear various ones of those individuals tell that joke and have it laughed at as if it was hysterical because they were telling it within their own social subgroup. So there was no cross boundary there that had to be acknowledged.
But you have said many times that you didn't feel as though the quality of the emotional relationship that you had with your primary caregivers growing up was positive.
Yeah.
And did you feel as though that impacted you during adolescence when you were in junior high school or high school?
I don't know that I thought about it until years later. When I was in junior high and high school,
and that's probably fair. I don't know that anybody does, that anybody, I was obviously not consciously aware of the quality of the relationship that I had with my primary caregivers and the effect that had in high school. I know that during high school, I felt profoundly like the things that I knew from my family of origin didn't make any sense in the context of things that I was learning in high school.
So I grew up in a violent alcoholic family. Mm-hmm. One of the rules of the alcoholic family is you never talk outside of home about home. You don't talk about what happened at home last night. You don't talk about the way your father behaves or your mother behaves or any of that stuff. You just don't say anything about it. So because I read all the time, I remember vividly in the 3rd grade that you could read and go away somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I could read a story about something in ancient history or something in another country and transport myself to that place and be caught up in that book and not be in the environment that I was in. So I read voraciously. Mm-hmm. Most nights I read a book overnight, just read all night. A lot of nights, and would try to incorporate within my personality presentation traits that I read in the books that the hero had. Dialect, dialogue, information, whatever. So I consciously created an identity, a public persona for being at school that was different from the person that I was at home.
Mm-hmm. So did you know then? Have you thought about it in retrospect, and do you know now how you were able to come to that realization for yourself, where you actually would read the books and then select specific personality traits? I think that's pretty unusual.
I don't know. Okay. I only have my own experience.
Right.
What I know is there was a boy that went to my
It's almost like
school.
you reparented yourself by reading the books.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's pretty unique.
I learned it from somebody else. There was a boy in the 3rd grade that was bullied by everybody, including myself, trying to fit in, trying to socialize with that group of aggressive 9-year-old boys. And I noticed this kid would go out at recess and climb to the top of the jungle gym. We had an old-fashioned jungle gym in the playground. And sit up there at recess and read a book. And he would be out of reach of everybody. Mm-hmm. Most of the boys would go off and play ball or tag or what have you. And the girls would go off in little groups and do whatever they did. But I kept watching him. And so one day I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm reading." And I said, "Why?" Mm-hmm. And he said, "Because I'm not here." Mm. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And so then I got a couple books and read them and started to realize I didn't have to be there either. Mm-hmm. I could do it at home. I mean, my father could be in a drunken rage and breaking furniture and knocking people around, and I could sit in my bedroom and read a book and not be afraid. Mm-hmm. So
the article that I sent is actually a science-based article, and it talks about the attachment with the primary caregiver, the quality of that attachment, and that's, all goes into John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth's attachment theory. So you have secure, you have the ambivalent, and then the resistant attachments, and then the disorganized. We don't really look at disorganized much because that's pretty pathologic. So the insecure attachments are the ambivalent, and then the resistant, and then how that plays out during adolescence. But we know now that these attachments, and specifically trauma, has a real biological impact on the development of the brain, physiological development. And yet, I think you and I both would say that our histories with our families of origin were difficult, traumatic. And yet, I think we turned out pretty good. So clearly, there are ways that you can compensate for that. But then there are some people who really struggle with that, and then they get to adolescence, and I just weep for the individuals that were like you and me that didn't find some way of being able to transcend that.
So my father was married 5 different times. And in the course of my early childhood, regularly, I mean, when I was 9 years old, I came home and they'd all moved away.
Yeah.
I mean, the house was empty.
I mean, you tell that story, and I know you to be a person who doesn't tend towards a hyperbole.
No, that's an absolute literal story.
I know, and I just think of a 9-year-old coming home from school and the house being empty and not knowing where in the world everybody went.
Yeah, I thought we'd been robbed.
It's just that's I don't even know how to wrap my head around that.
Well, but that wasn't the point of what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that I don't know who, can't identify, especially in infancy, who was the object in object relations theory, who provided the consistent nurturing presence in my life. What I do know is that as I grew up, there were teachers and scoutmasters and coaches who played significant periods of support that gave me positive reinforcement and a sense of security about capacity, about intelligence, about performance, about courage, whatever. And the books that I read gave me an understanding for how to manipulate the environment at home and differently manipulate the environment in school so that I felt more safe and more capable of moving through the social hierarchy. One of my absolute expectations in high school, because of where I lived and the circumstances of a small southern town, was that I would get a college education to be able to get a job that would pay me enough money to live in a different social custom level. So that's what I did. I mean, I knew I had to. Otherwise, my destiny was the script that was written for me by generations of my family, none of whom had ever gone to school.
Right. And no one in my family ever went to school. And I hear very profoundly what you're saying about there were teachers, there were coaches, there were other persons, adult persons in the environment that provided you with an example that you could use in place of that external object. You know, I really felt like I was bumbling through grade school and junior high school, and then went to high school and started playing football, mostly because I was trying to get my dad's attention.
Yeah.
But every year that I played, and I tell people all the time, the only thing that stopped me from being able to play professional football is a general basic lack of coordination. I mean, I am not what you would consider an athlete, but I played every year and I worked hard, and every year that I played football, at the end of the year, I got the most improved player award, which is what you give to the guy, right, who is not going to get any, but busts his butt. And I was willing to do anything that a coach asked me, and I won these awards. And I really genuinely attribute that to profoundly changing my conceptualization of myself, because I wasn't getting that anywhere else. And I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't done that.
So I'm thinking in particular, and it's a good time to have this conversation, because there's a lot of conversations out right now about teachers and the role that teachers play in society. I had several teachers in high school in particular that reached out to me and said, you have these abilities, you have to learn how to navigate it so that you can get something out of it. One of whom was the school librarian. And I became a volunteer library assistant and became the president of the Arkansas Junior Librarians Association through her support and auspices, which means nothing to anybody now, but it meant a lot to me then. 50 years after I graduated from high school, I went to a high school reunion. First time I'd gone back. 50 years later. So I'm having dinner with some friends, and we were talking about school, and I said, well, Mrs. Carpenter, Elaine Carpenter. Mrs. Carpenter was such a significant person in my life. I wish I'd been able to tell her that. And somebody said, well, you still can. I said, what do you mean? I thought she was dead. She said, no, she's not dead. So I called her. And I said, I want to tell you, you steered my life into the survival lane. And you helped me become a teacher, and you have helped me reach other kids. And I want you to know that 50 years after you worked with me, your lessons are still echoing into generations of kids you've never met. 5 years later, I heard from one of her sons. She had died. And he said, I just want to let you know, my mother became senile toward the end of her life. There were very few memories that she could hold. And she held the memory of your phone call.
Wow.
And she repeated it to me every day the last few weeks of her life about how important that phone call was and what it meant to her that you had called her and that you told her she was that seminal in your life.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to say is, if you have a teacher who has touched your life, who has reached you at whatever level of education, let them know. Tell them, because they do an incredible service to all of us, and they need more respect.
So let's take our break, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you my story.
All right. Oh, because I was your teacher.
Yes. Hey everybody, Dr. Michael Mahan here from Psych with Mike, and I couldn't be more excited to talk to you about Athletic Greens, which is a new sponsor we have here on the show. I started taking Athletic Greens, watching some YouTube videos, and doing my own research. I wanted to add something to my daily workout program to give me some energy and to support gut health. And that was the one thing that kept coming up again and again with Athletic Greens, is the guy who started the company did a bunch of research because he was having some gut health issues that he couldn't get any resolution for. He developed Athletic Greens, and it's just exploded from there. So it's 75 superfoods, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, whole food sources that's all in one daily scoop. You put it in 8 or 12 ounces of water, you shake it up, and you drink it. The taste is very, very drinkable. I actually enjoy it, and I have been using it, and my energy levels have just been through the roof. I really like Athletic Greens because of some of the sustainability things that they do. So they buy carbon credits, and to help protect the rainforest, which is something that I really like. But if you order Athletic Greens in your subscription, you're going to also get a year's supply of their vitamin D supplementation and 5 free travel packs. And that vitamin D is so important during those winter months when we're not getting enough sunlight. We've talked about how that decreases your mood and increases depression, and that can be a real deal changer. So you go to athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's athleticgreens.com/EMERGING. That's the Psych with Mike promo, and you're going to get that additional vitamin D support for a year and 5 free travel packs. So take control of your own health today. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. So, I hadn't originally thought about this in the context of the current societal zeitgeist, but you're absolutely right. This is a great time to, and this wasn't why I had originally thought about this topic, but this is a great segue or great avenue to go down. My son is a teacher. My son is a teacher in the school that you started your teaching career, which is amazing to me. But so I have a great respect for teachers, and I don't know why. While you were telling this story, this came to me. I do not remember. I remember the name of all the names of every football coach I ever had. I do not remember the name of a single teacher save two.
Huh.
When I was living in Granite City, Illinois, going to Washington Elementary School, which doesn't exist anymore, there were two teachers there that I actually remember, Mr. Dixon and Mr. Swoboda. I know these are real people because downstairs in my workshop, I actually have a ruler that has Swoboda written on the back of it. That was a ruler that he gave me when I was in 4th or 5th grade. And the reason why these names stay with me is because we were having a discussion in a class about origins. And Mr. Dixon who taught social studies, was talking about, origins, and he was asking kids in the class, well, what is your family origin? And he got to me, and I said, I have no idea.
Jim Beam?
I said, I don't think I have an origin. Yeah. And he said, your last name's Mahan. And I said, yeah. And he said, that's Irish. And that was the first time that anybody had ever given me any kind of a compass to be able to think about in terms of who I was, and that changed my foundational perception of myself. Finally, I could say, oh, my family comes from Ireland. I'd never known that. No one in my family ever talked about such things.
Yeah.
So then Mr. Swoboda taught math, but I would go to summer school every year. Not because I had to, I made great grades, but because I didn't have anything else to do. So if I walked to school every day, which is what we did back then, they would let me go to school. And so over the summer, I would just walk to school because I didn't have anything else to do. And I would hang out there. And in Mr. Swoboda's class, we didn't have air conditioning. And so we would open all of the windows and turn on these gigantic fans and sit on the floor and turn out all of the lights. And during summer school, Mr. Swoboda would read to us the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew mysteries.
Yep.
And I would go every day just to be able to go and sit on the floor and have him read to us.
That's one of the more important things that parents can do.
Yeah. And my kids will tell you to this day that there was not a single day that went by in either one of their lives that they can remember from the time that they were born until they started school when I did not read to them.
Yeah, that's really important.
And these memories that I hadn't thought about these things until you were telling me this, and you're absolutely right. Those were seminal things. That's the impact of teachers. And so whatever people think about teachers right now in our society, and I can't even imagine a more difficult time to be a teacher, and I think about this with my son every day. I mean, if somebody walked into a school that my son were teaching at with a gun, I don't know what I would do.
Well, that's not the only issue. You also have the issues about, he's a social studies teacher. Does he teach critical race theory? What does he teach about transgendered and other sexual orientations or realities? What does he teach about what's going on in our society? Because there's rage in the community about what should be taught and how it should be taught, and how pathetic teachers are, and how they're all on some kind of liberal agenda to change the world and destroy Christianity and so on. I think it's a horrible time to be a teacher, but I would also say thank God for the teachers that I had who were seminal in my life. I mean,
I don't even know.
And thank God for the opportunity to tell Elaine Carpenter what she meant to me.
Well, I was just thinking, I don't think I could find these gentlemen. I may try and see if I can discover But just the fact that this is all coming back to me is making me recognize that you are absolutely right. In those when those family of origins are not good, where are you getting
somewhere
that?
to go?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And thank God that you and I had teachers in our lives.
Let's also make the point, coaches are teachers.
Yeah.
And if you had significant coaches who encouraged you and got more out of you than you would normally give, that needs to be acknowledged and validated.
Yeah. Mr. Jennings and Mr. Robidoux.
My coaches were debate coaches.
Yes, I know. Because you're so much more intellectual than I am.
More verbally astute, I think.
Yeah. And you know what? But I mean, I'm making light of that, and I shouldn't, because there's no question that choir, debate, those kinds of pursuits are just as legitimate as playing football or soccer or baseball.
Amen.
Yeah. But, okay, so I teach college. I call myself a professor. Well, the college calls me a professor. I don't think of myself as a teacher. Did you feel like that teaching college was the same as teaching high school?
Teaching is teaching. The content is what you present, but what you do is make connections with your students and open windows for them.
Maybe I feel like it's different because I feel like by the time they get to me in college, most of that formulative development has already taken place. I don't feel like I'm probably making the same kind of impact in their lives.
Well, I don't think you can, because if you're in the second, third, or fourth grade, you have a very limited range of access to world experiences. The older you get, if you're in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and it's the same thing with doing counseling with adolescents, they can find other reference points to pay attention to and other things to invest themselves in than you and your opinion of them. And by the time they're in graduate school, that's even a broader challenge.
Yeah.
So you have the opportunity. You present your material. You're committed to knowing what you know, and you're offering that to the people that say, I want to know what you know. But it's still the dance of relationship and the effort to open windows in their mind.
But I think that both of us then are saying that these individuals who are spending time with our children in these classrooms from first grade until high school are the people who have the ability to potentially correct damage that may be being done to those individuals
in their families of origin.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that any teacher who might be hearing this, and hopefully this will be disseminated broadly and lots of teachers will hear it. Any teacher that's hearing this, do not take that for granted. Don't undersell the potential impact of that, because you have two people who had horrible family of origin stories who are sitting here saying that we attribute our ability to have transcended that to the teachers that we knew in our lives.
Yeah.
And that's, I just can't imagine something that is more profound than that.
I wish more people saw it that way.
So, do you think that that's what caused you to want to be a teacher?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I don't think I ever knew that.
Yeah. And not that one.
No.
Yeah. Two or three other teachers, the debate coach,
but I'm saying
history teacher.
So you had a much more profound understanding that these teachers had given you something that you didn't get from your family of origin than I did until I was much older.
Well, I'll have to accept your analysis there.
Well, but I'm saying because it drove you to want to be a teacher.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
I'll tell you, I love teaching high school as much the day I quit teaching high school 20 years down the road as I did the day I started.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would teach high school today.
Yeah.
It's changed too much.
It's changed too much, and it's just amazing to me.
There are too many agendas, too many righteously indignant people.
And people managing hedge funds are just making out like robber barons, and we can't pay teachers a living wage. That's
right.
Unbelievable. We
Our culture doesn't value it.
no. We need to have a come to Jesus meeting about what we think the priorities are in life. But that's not a topic for this show.
For today.
All right. Hopefully, people enjoyed that. And if you are a teacher and you have a perspective that you would like to share with us, we would certainly be open to that. You can get us psychwithmike.com. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We would love it if you would go onto the Apple Podcasts, find Psych with Mike, and rate us, leave a review. But most importantly, please go to the YouTubes if you haven't already done so, and subscribe to the show. That is super, super beneficial for us. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.